Welcome to the Salience podcast, where we identify what stands out from all the noise.
On the Salience podcast today, we explore feedforward. What I mean by feedforward is some form of preemptive scenario testing and preparation to avoid events going wrong and to develop systemic resilience ahead of events going wrong. And by systemic resilience, we're more concerned about being prepared for the unexpected than accurately predicting and preparing for a single possible future. Feedforward can, of course, follow on from feedback, though the emphasis is very different. Often feedback is lagged in time, far too late to do anything about it, and it's often bundled up in criticism of the person rather than situational assessment or the quality of decisions. We previously interviewed Brian Rivera, a former Top Gun pilot. One subject we touched on was OODA, the observe, orient, decide, act loop of John Boyd, and the importance of after-action reviews or the debrief. As many of you know, Mike and I wrote about OODA looping in our book Resilience by Design. In there, we emphasise the importance of Boyd's feed-forward loops. One way we can feed forward is embodied visualisation. Another is scenario planning, and another is red teaming, which is creating a team to attack your plan. These are not exclusive approaches, of course. We can use embodied visualization and scenario testing with a red team. In a return to learning from military leadership, today I am joined by retired Navy Commander Brady Turnage. Brady has a 20-year aviation career that culminated as the commanding officer of a carrier-based jet squadron. He has deployed at sea and ashore all over the world, logging more than 100 combat missions over Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. After retiring, he was a member of the men's lacrosse coaching staff at the University of Delaware. Currently, Brady is an instructor at The Program, a US veteran leadership development and team building company, and he is a high school head lacrosse coach. Today, we're going to explore feed-forward loops through the lens of military planning and lacrosse. Welcome, Brady.
Ian, thank you for having me today. It is an honor to be here with you. I've learned a ton from you and from your guests. You've had some very unique, interesting guests. So thank you for having me.
Oh, fantastic. Before we get going, I want to go way back. I want to go back before your military career started. And I want you to think a little bit about some of your early experiences with perhaps feedback even.
Okay. Feedback. You mentioned it just a second ago, and I agree with you. It does get the way you described. My early experiences with feedback overall, I would say, are very healthy. I was able to avoid through no doing of my own, able to avoid some of what you described as the barriers to feedback. My parents really let me just kind of figure things out on my own and make my own decisions and take action. That was always one of their biggest lessons, was just take action, right? So they let me run my own OODA loop, basically. They didn't call it that. I didn't hear about that until I was an adult, but that's what they were doing. They were letting me do that cycle completely on my own. I rarely heard, you should have done this. Why did you do that? Instead, what I would hear was, okay, great job. What are you going to do next? Or when I messed things up, which was usually the case, okay, that didn't work. Not the end of the world. What do you think you should do? What do you need to do differently? And they rarely gave me the answers. They may ask an open-ended question to steer me down a path, but they didn't give me answers. So I had this open feedback from them that allowed me the freedom to really sort through my own OODA loop from a very young age. And then I would say I'd transition that into my teenage years as a high school football and lacrosse player. I had very, very good coaches. Yes, they were good X's and O's and on the field coaches, but they were better men and they were better people. I got, and all of us did on those teams, lots of very direct, loud, intense feedback, and sometimes harsh. And I say that, I put all those words together, and there may be people listening that go, oh, that doesn't sound productive or healthy. but it was, and I'll tell you why. We knew, and I say we because it wasn't just me, it was me and my teammates. We knew that those coaches loved us. And the word love is used on purpose. They loved us. They knew us. They knew our family backgrounds. They established relationships with us. I graduated from high school in 1994. I'm still in touch with both of those coaches to this day. They're still mentors of mine. And I love them. So they were able to be harsh when they needed to. They were always able to be direct and honest with their feedback. And I knew they were doing it to make me better and to make us better. So my experience with feedback, generally speaking, has been a very healthy one.
Yeah, that's fantastic. In my experience, that's unusual. Most people recoil from feedback, though not people like yourself who've really risen to the ranks, peak performance, high consequence jobs. Often people that thrive in those environments have sought out feedback and they're able to process or reframe, use the words loud, intense, harsh feedback. They can reframe that. And what I like about what you did, and this is my word now, is going to that level of intention, which is for you. They love you. It's for your benefit. It's so that you can be the best that you can be. And I think just connecting to that allows you to go, come on, give it to me so I can be better. And where does that go to? What happened when you got into the military?
Great question. I was just going to make a comment on that. That relationship with feedback when I got into the military, that's probably where I struggled with it the most, because it's just in abundance. You just get it nonstop. And at first, it sets you back on your heels a little bit. And it never, ever ends. Even when you do something really well, the feedback just keeps on coming. I remember walking out of some flight briefs, Ian, thinking, oh boy, they may not let me climb into another airplane again ever. When I was a young aviator, and my instructor, my mentor, the senior guy in the squadron, whoever it was that I was flying with, would walk out of there with a smile on his face. And in some cases, hey, let's go grab a beer. And I'm sitting there going, wait, I thought I just got taken to the woodshed out there. And it's like, no, that's just a debrief. We're just getting better, man. That had nothing to do with you. That was about the flight and your performance. That's a debrief. That's it. That's all it is. And once I got a couple of reps of that and that post debrief interaction, I was like, okay, now I understand. Now I feel much better about this. That's just the culture that surrounded that environment. And Ian, it's what keeps us alive in those high risk environments, high risk, high consequence environments. I am alive, I guarantee you, because of all of that tough feedback I've gotten over the years.
What a fantastic contrast from your early years coaching as an athlete. You've gone from an environment where it is about you, it's about love, it's about your intention, about their intention to make you the best that you can be. And suddenly you've flipped. And in fact, you've got lots and lots of harsh feedback. And as you said, it's non-stop. Even when you've done well, they're looking to pick holes in the finest detail. And then it's not about you. It's about the performance. It's about the flight. Completely different culture, yet still high quality feedback helping you perform at your best. And in this case, keep you alive in a high consequence environment, but radically different culture.
That's right. And the culture was all about the team. What is the best thing for the team so that we can execute in the most severe, most austere environments with the deck stacked against us? That's what we're training for ultimately. So it's all about, you're a member of this team. We need you to be at your very best. So yes, it's about the performance, and it seems, again, harsh at times. However, it's built upon this really amazing bedrock of trust. I trust you with my life. You trust me with your life.
Yeah. Unfortunately, many of the frontline agencies that I'm working with, trust is a major issue for frontline staff. They often don't trust their commanding officers, their next in charge, their managers. And I think trust and that there are multiple elements to trust. I think one element is like your first coaching experience, which is trust that somebody has your best intentions right front and center. I think then the second thing relates to the second part of your experience of learning and debrief, which is about the focus on execution and doing what I said I was going to do. I think these are two elements of trust for me. If you know somebody's fundamentally got your best intentions at heart, and then second of all, they deliver what they say they're going to do, they've got skin in the game, they go, I'm going to execute. And you talked about execution. I think they're the two fundamental building blocks of trust, actually. I'd like to explore now and build on that feedback, the insights. How do you take them forward into feed forward? How do you take feedback into improved execution, improved management of risk, particularly in complex, ambiguous situations? What happens? How do you do it?
I think its foundations are exactly the same as feedback. And that is what we're just talking about. It's trust. I have to trust you. You have to trust me before I can really begin to give some feed forward, or you can give feed forward. And I think in terminology is important here. You and I, as we talk over the next chunk of time here, we'll probably use the term red teaming, red cell, feed forward, maybe even murder board. That's probably not a super comfortable term for everyone, but it's one we used in the military. We'll use those terms interchangeably, I think. So feed forward is based on trust. I can't come and tack your plan for the budget, the project, the objective in the mountains we're trying to get to, the contingency plan to get down from that objective in the mountains. I can't come attack that plan of yours if you and I don't trust one another. Because if you and I don't trust one another, I'm probably going to try and take it over, and you're probably going to get defensive, and it's going to be a net negative. That's divisive rather than building us up. So the foundation is the same. It's trust. It's open communication. I think another element of this is we look at that feedback. What did we do last time? And one of the main things about that feedback is, how can we improve next time? What do we need to adjust for next time? Now I get to next time, but before I go execute this next time, I want to do some feed forward. I want to, for lack of a better term, I want to stink check my plan. And if I'm using end-to-end analysis, I'm going to take what I learned from that last time and during that feedback portion, and I'm going to bring it right into my feed forward part to make those adjustments. I'm going to present my plan to you, and you're still going to pick it apart, but it's a better plan because I'm using the lens of the feedback during our feed forward exercise.
I'd like to create a hypothetical for you. You've been put in charge of a team. You've got a high consequences mission, and that could be anything. Could be in business. Could be coaching. And you don't have trust at this point. And as you say, you need to stink test the plan. Whatever they're thinking of doing, you need to have enough trust. You need to build it quickly. What do you do to build trust quickly in a team that doesn't necessarily have it from the get-go?
Oh, this is a great question. I love this one. So I'm going to build some rapport, right? Maybe I don't have trust yet, at least two-way trust, but I can build rapport in 47 seconds, right? Let's say I walk into a room and there's 15 people on that team and I only know 11 of them. I'm going to walk over to if I really care and I really want this to go well and I really want us to perform as a team, I'm going to walk over to those 4 people I don't know and I'm going to introduce myself. Hey, I'm Brady Turnage. What's your name? And I'm just, tell me about what you do. Tell me about your expertise. I can do that in less than a minute. Now I've built a little bit of rapport. Now before I start, testing that plan or red selling that plan, or going into this feed forward loop again, all the same thing here, just different terms. I'm going to explain what we're doing. Hey, the 15 of you are here because you're experts in this area. You've put together what I know is a solid plan. I'm going to ask you a couple questions, one to bring me up to speed on some of the gaps in my knowledge, and two, just so we all can get a dry run, a test, a rep or two under our belts before we actually go execute this. And if we want to adjust something, let's adjust something. Now it's free to do it right now. So I'm going to openly explain what I'm doing. I'm going to openly say, hey, I don't have all the answers. I may be the leader in this scenario or the senior person, but you guys are the experts and I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, nice. You've got some really nice framing and reframing happening in there. When you're building rapport, there's name, what you do, and you're already framing them as experts. You're saying, what's your expertise? So it's a real positive building process. And you keep that going from rapport into your explanation, your framing of what you're here for. And you start with, I know you've got a solid plan, and it's about building on the solid plan. You don't go in and say, hey, I'm going to assume your plan's rubbish. Let's pull it apart. Right. So we don't get people off guard to begin with. It's like, hey, yeah, I'm an expert and I've got a solid plan. And now how can we make it even better? And then you've got another piece on the reframe, which is, I don't know what's going on here. I'm the leader, and there's a humility piece, right, which says, tell me what I need to know. So that immediately people are going, they're not fearful of you because you're the one that's saying, I actually don't know. So there's quite a lot in that. You said 47 seconds. You've got your rapport and you're starting, but there's a lot of presuppositions in the way that you frame what you do. And I think that's enormously important.
Yeah, a couple points, Ian. I think we're talking about a skill that has to be trained. However, the most important element, that trust, it's about relationships. The relationship is critical. And if I have 47 seconds to build a relationship, I'm going to build the best one I can. And if I ask that question about expertise, and I've got someone in the back of the room who's pretty quiet and not making much eye contact, and I say, well, hey, how about you in the back corner there? What's your expertise? Well, I don't know. I'm new. I don't even know what my expertise is. Right. My response to that would be something along the lines of, well, then you're the best person to ask questions. It's oftentimes the new person who doesn't have the bias of the group or the bad habits of 20 years of experience that can ask the most basic question in the world and make every other top-notch expert in the room go, I don't know why we do that. I don't know why we use this piece of equipment rather than this other piece of equipment. So that new guy mentality is, show up and be humble and listen, but you're also probably going to see some things that the rest of us miss.
Yeah, wow. Again, I'm going to use my language here a little bit just to frame it into the way that we coach and train. What you're doing is you're capitalizing on the diversity in the room, particularly the quiet ones, the naive, the new. And in complexity theory, we talk about the importance of understanding inattentional blindness. Inattentional blindness is where we have experts who become blind to novelty because they're pattern matching and they jump to conclusions and they think they know what's going on, but they don't see novelty. All sorts of antidotes to that. One metaphor is the pizza boy experiment, where you get a bunch of experts in the room and then you hire in somebody to deliver a pizza and then you pay them extra to say, come and ask naive questions about what we're talking about right now. And the idea is you're getting somebody who has no idea that can ask the obvious questions, point out the gorilla in the room or the grey rhino or whatever it is your metaphor is, right? And I really like the way that you do that and you describe that. And you're dead right, that framing. You could be the best person in the room right now to help us improve this plan. I think what's your experience of that when you start getting into the red teaming activity and you're really starting to pull the plan apart? Tell us a little bit about that process and that role of the diverse person, the person who's not that expert.
The more involved I can get that person, or the more involved we can get that person, the better. And here's why I say that. An aggressive red teamer, an aggressive feed forwarder is your best friend. Again, assuming we have trust, and if we haven't had the opportunity to build trust, assuming we've at least got a basic rapport going, the more aggressive they can be in picking my plan apart, the more useful they are to the team. So I'm going to, if they're not volunteering their thought or input or their barbs to my plan, I may ask them a question or two. Hey, poke holes in this for me. All right. So in aviation, let's take a very simple example. Maybe we're planning a training mission, and the weather out in the area, in the airspace where we're going to work, is forecast to be very good. But 60 miles away at the time we're scheduled to land, the weather at the airfield is forecast to be spotty, and that may give us some problems. I may ask that person, hey, how do we get all 20 of these airplanes back on deck within the same 10 or 15 minutes, right? We've been talking about the mission airspace for so long. Can you be my expert on the airfield? Tell me what you're thinking here, right? So we kind of break apart the big task into multiple tasks, and maybe that new quiet person is just working feed forward on how do we safely land. That's all they're doing. They're not even concerned with the mission because they know the mission's in good hands with the rest of the team. I just need that person to work on this specific part of what we're going out there to do tonight.
Yeah, I like that. I like that division of saying, of being able to focus in on one part of a mission or a plan, and having somebody really just pay attention to that. It provides a nice bounding frame and a bit of focus, and there's something there that I'm trying to put my finger on. I think it's about the downside planning that's often underdone. I think there's sometimes a big focus on achieving the goal or the mission without doing the downside planning and thinking about the consequences and the what ifs. Mountaineering is a great example. Most people die in mountaineering on the way home, on the way trying to get down the mountain. They've achieved the mission, they got to the top, they just don't make it back down again.
I was going to mention mountaineering. I think it's probably the best and most vivid picture in people's minds. And I know you've spent years and years in the mountains. Yeah, I get to the top of a mountain or of an objective, and I'm at the most isolated point I can be. I'm probably exhausted. I've probably been going at it for a long time. This is what everyone has thought about, getting to this summit. Has anyone thought in detail about what time is it going to be when we start down? What's our physical and mental condition going to be? What's the team makeup going to look like at this point? What's our contingency plan when something goes wrong? Maybe we plan to bring 4 people to the summit and we only get 2 up there. Does that make getting down harder, easier? What happens if one of those 2 gets hurt and now our direct rescue effort, at least initially, is a single person? Has anyone thought through those details? Because that's not glamorous. That's not what they write articles and make TV shows about. But that is essential. Again, we bet our lives on it, right?
Yeah, you touch on a really important part there. It's not the glamorous bit. You know, in business, executing your plan, you might be trying to build your business. What are the consequences of building your business? How many people do you lose along the way because you're aggressively trying to grow and everybody's pulling their hair out? And in my case, you've lost your hair. And because there's so much intensity, and it's, you're building, you're growing, but people are burning out along the way. What's the consequence of that for the business as a whole? Have you thought about that when you've got an aggressive growth strategy rather than a sustainable growth strategy? I'm going from mountains to the military to business here. And I like what you said there. We need people to pay attention to the part that's not glamorous. I know one person in particular is absolutely amazing at business development. The growth that they're able to achieve is phenomenal. And absolutely no building of the back end frameworks or capabilities or humans to deliver the programs. And I think that's their big Achilles. And they need somebody who's very strong at executing on sustainable plans and resourcing to achieve the delivery of this business growth. So that's where teams come in. I'm interested as well. I want to go to a situation where you might be involved in one of these quite critical reviews. You've got a red team. You're looking at your plan, and have you come across situations where you've got somebody who is running a different agenda? They're not coherent with the mission. My experience is it's usually about them and their own power. Have you come across that, and what did you do about it if you did?
I have come across it, not very often, though. I will say that I'm very fortunate to have been on teams where, again, in the building of relationships, in the formation and the maintenance of culture, most of that behavior is tamped out pretty quickly, which is why I say feedback and feed forward is all based on relationships and trust. However, when I have seen it, the few times I've seen it, it gets directly addressed right then and right there. We don't let that agenda dominate the room. It's dangerous. Or in the business world, it can kill our revenue. It can kill market share. It can be a big PR problem. It can be a rather short incident in duration that we spend months or years fixing. So it must be addressed immediately. And typically it's a one-on-one encounter. It doesn't have to be adversarial. In fact, it's best if it's not. So if I'm that person who I'm taking this personally and I'm trying to get my agenda pumped into this thing, you're going to pull me out in the hallway. You're going to go, "Hey, Brady, come on out here for a sec." You're going to take me out in the hallway, private conversation, and go, seems like something's grinding on you. Tell me what you're thinking here. So you're giving me the benefit of the doubt. You're giving me a chance to tell you what's eating at me. Why am I pushing my agenda? Do I not understand the plan? Do I not understand the objective? Or am I truly just being selfish? And if you can pull that out and we can solve it right then and there, perfect. We're right back into the room doing our thing. If we can't, then as the leader, you may be in the tough situation where you go, "Why don't you take a break, man? Give us 30 minutes. You need to go chill out. Go grab some lunch. Go grab a cup of coffee. Take a break." Because what we're doing in there is not getting us any further. And that's a harsh message for some people to hear, but it's one you got to deliver as a leader. And if you're not willing to deliver a message like that as a leader, you're in the wrong position.
In my experiences, there has been quite significant differences between teams and agencies with their resilience or their robustness or the willingness to want to excel, want the feedback, want to know how they can improve. A lot of teams I work with are extraordinarily defensive. Trust is low. In fact, I've measured trust in using what's called the clean language methodology, working out what exactly trust would be for that team. And they've scored it like 2.8 out of 10. Right, so you're not red teaming anywhere near with a team that's got trust at 2.8 out of 10. You're just nowhere near that. You've got so much work to do before you get there. What I'm building here is differences with teams and organisations. I'd like to sort of ask you, what's your experience of working across military, sporting, and business contexts? What are some of the differences you might have seen, and how do you adapt when you're looking to create effective feed forward?
So the differences in those three arenas, I'll start out by classifying them each with a short phrase. In the military, that red teaming is expected or well established. In the sports world, it's got a slightly different format, but I would call it a scout team, right? Part of your team in practice is playing whoever we're going to go against this week. They're running their offense, their defense, their schemes. That's a form of red teaming. And then in the business world, and this is a generalization, I would say that red teaming is underutilized. And the little note I jotted down in next to underutilized was relationships. Before we even started talking today, it's underutilized because of relationships. So that's how those are the phrases I would intro to discuss the differences in those three arenas. I think in a business environment, red teaming, feed forward and feedback is something that needs to be specifically and overtly trained to. In my role at the program, when we work with our corporate clients, and we work with corporate clients and athletic clients, I spend most of my time with our corporate clients. That feedback or debrief side is something we teach. And boy, we're pushing a big rock up a steep hill when we teach it. We have to really dig in and be on our A game and teach and repeat and get reps and reps and reps and reps. Same thing with that red cell or that feed forward thing. We really have to get in there and teach it. So if you're in the corporate arena and you're one of the few organizations doing this, I compliment you. If you're in the corporate arena and you're not doing this, or this seems like, oh, my team could never do this, what I would tell you is don't even try it. Work on relationships first. If you haven't, once we get make some headway in the relationships and trust and open communication, okay, now let's start incorporating this and keep it very simple, right? The red teaming might be as simple as a 10-minute, Ian, would you listen to the presentation I'm going to give tomorrow and tell me how my opening is? Or Ian, please listen to this. I say a lot. Can you count how many times I say and tell me if I'm clicking my pen? Start very simple. That's a very simple, I'm just looking at one element. Start there and gain some comfort with it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Again, that relates back to what you said earlier about being able to break apart aspects of the plan. And in this case, it's aspects of performance. And in a corporate setting, even down to presentations and how many times I say One of the ways that we do that we train this, is when we're training, on day one, we'll set each of the trainers a challenge. We'll provide feedback and feed forward, and we'll role model it in real time with the group. And we'll say, here is one thing that I'm working on as a presenter to you. Your job is to track how well I do and give me feedback to help me be better. So I'll role model it. And is a great one. We want you to tell us if we say or in my case, if I swear, whatever it might be that we're working on, right? It could be more animation. It could be less animation. It could be all sorts of stuff. But we role model this right from the get-go as trainers. And I like what you said there about those distinctions. In the military, it's expected. In sporting, you can do that, and there's an expectation. You'll have teams playing against each other to make each other better, even within the same team or organization. You'll have that. And in business, you might need to go right back to the fundamentals of relationship building before you get there. I think that really resonates with my experience. I've taken three or four really salient points from our conversation today that I'm going to share back. I think the first was the importance of culture. And what I really liked about your opening was it wasn't that there has to be this type of culture to achieve effective feedback feed forward. There are different ways of different cultures. There are some fundamental processes, though the culture in a sporting team was radically different to the culture in the military, yet both were really, really effective at feedback feed forward for you. I took away from you that there's a real importance about the team, the unit of a team, and I think this is fundamental. I read somewhere recently that the phenomenon of psychological safety in an organization happens at the level of team, and I really, really agree with that. That's what I've seen. If you can build teams, team by team, and get organizational safety or team safety, psych safety to operate at the level of team, it will then cascade throughout the business as a resilient organization. And I think then there's trust. The importance of trust and building relationships, even if it's 47 seconds of rapport, whatever you need to do to build that first before you go anywhere else. Then there's all sorts of applications: business, sporting, military, personal. And I want to sort of then end by redirecting your attention now outside of this our conversation here, and just think a little bit about drawing people's attention to things that are important in the world. If that's for you, and you're now unbounded, you can go anywhere you like. Where would you direct people's attention? If you could direct it in one direction, what would it be?
I think first I would direct it inward for each one of us. And what I mean by that, a little more specifically, is accountability. I need to hold myself accountable. And then I need to be tough enough, emotionally resilient enough, it's really emotional resilience, to hold my teammates accountable. So accountability is one area I would direct people to. And another is resilience, mental, physical, and emotional resilience or toughness. They're not completely interchangeable terms, but they're related. The reason I would direct people there, Ian, is our world is full of problems, full of big problems. In America today, there are some experts who say we're going through the most difficult or most challenging times we've ever gone through. I disagree. I disagree very adamantly with that. I think we've been through far tougher things. We will figure out the tough times we're in right now. I think our society is more polar than it ever has been. I think it's very easy to have an opinion and rant and rave on COVID, climate change, the economy, immigration, border control. I'm bringing up hot button issues, right? It's very easy for me to take my opinion and rant and rave on those. I'm not an expert in any of that stuff, and I never will be. Experts in those areas have dedicated their entire professional lives to them. I'm not one of those people. I have opinions on all those things, but I'm not an expert. I can be an expert in holding myself accountable. I can be an expert in contributing on a smaller scale to my family, the sports team I coach, my climbing partners, my church group, my department at work. I would focus people's attention to what can I do on my level? And it starts with, am I personally accountable? And then it moves forward to, how can I build more resilience in my life? Because we are living in tough times. I do agree with that. There are challenges, and certainly for kids. I think being a kid today is more difficult than when I grew up. Had I had my hands on social media and iPhones when I was growing up, I would have behaved far more poorly than my children behave. I'll tell you that. So I think it's difficult to be a child right now. I think resilience is critical, again, on 3 different levels: physically, mentally, and emotionally. So those are the 2 areas where I would point people, including me, first.
Yeah, I really like that answer.
You know, Ian, I believe on one of the values on my lacrosse team, and it's a value for us at the program, is being selfless. To my lacrosse team, I describe that as team, teammate, self, in that order. The paradox there is, if I haven't held myself accountable, if I haven't taken care of what I need to take care of, I can't help my teammate and I can't contribute to the team. So in a way, I almost need to have that. It's not selfish, but I need to have that focus on myself to be able to contribute to the team and to be able to help the teammate to the left of me and to the right of me. And we talk about the same thing at where I work at the program, just in different words, right? Selfless. We talk about selfless is I take strain for my teammates, and I know they'll take strain for me when I need their help. So that's kind of one way that I think it manifests itself. I don't look at it as selfish. I look at it as I can't contribute if I'm a disaster personally.
Yeah, I agree entirely. You mentioned polarity. There's often a binary, good, bad. It's this or it's that. There's not really an effort to understand the middle ground, the different perspectives, and come at a resolution there. And one of the polarities I often hear is that behavior is an emergent property from systems. And coach, there's no point coaching. There's no point people doing the self piece because it just depends on the system. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got coaches who go, it's all about the person. And of course, I think it's about both. It's about relationships between people. It's about individuals. It's about the system, and all of those properties. But fundamentally, if you've got people that are stressed, not resilient, and blaming others, you're not going to have an effective system. And fundamentally, the operator of individuals being resilient and supporting each other, and I like that cascade, yourself into your teammate, into your team, and then into organizations, if we expand that out, and into some of these wicked problems that society's facing. You talk about this concept that, these are the toughest times, and you're saying, well, actually, they've been a lot tougher. And I think they have. There's plenty of examples back through history where times are a lot worse than they are right now. That doesn't mean to say I don't think we're on the tipping point of some really quite horrendous events that are coming our way. And I think you said something else that's super important, which is, what can I do? What can I focus on in my life? And for me, there's a level of granularity about that everyone needs to accept personal responsibility for climate change, immigration, the hot button topics you mentioned. What is it that you're doing personally? You might have an opinion, and what are you actually doing to make the situation better? I think once we all start doing that, we're in a position where I think some of these complex challenges will get solved, and it'll probably be more organic, ground up by many, many people taking small granular pieces of action than it will from a government or intergovernmental agency. I have a low confidence that they'll solve these problems. Just thinking ahead, we're talking about feed forward now, and at a global level and a local level, and how it's all interconnected. What are we started with your early days, and then you've had a fantastic career in the military and now coaching and training. What are your future aspirations? It can be work or life, and how are you using feed forward in your personal life, in your personal aspirations?
I definitely use feed forward in my personal life, sometimes successfully and sometimes not. My aspirations, I don't have a master's degree. I've always wanted one. I've struggled with what I should get it in. And I think as time goes by that I keep coming back to something in the arena of psychology. So I'm getting more and more enticed and more specific to want to start that. So that's definitely a goal out there. I want to keep building the culture on my lacrosse team. That's our number one goal every single year. In fact, I was just talking with our athletic director today about it. If culture is not the number one goal on that team, it's because I'm not the coach of it. As long as I'm there, it'll always be culture. And we use, in the framework of that culture, we use feed forward all the time. I use it in a very informal way on the field, but I try to use it every day. And an example would look like this. It would come in question form to all of the players collectively or to one player who I was coaching. But really, I'm talking to the whole team, right? The kid goes and picks a ground ball. the ball ends up being on the ground in lacrosse a fair amount, and you have to pick it up with a stick. There are right and wrong ways to pick up ground balls. There are players who are very good at getting the ball off the ground and players who are not. And it's at the college level, typically the team who picks up ground balls the best wins the national championship. So it's a huge part of the game. So I might ask a player, tell me why you chose that technique to pick up the ground ball. Or when might we use this technique? Give me a game scenario where we might move away from our default technique and use this other technique to pick up a ground ball. I want to use feed forward in the form of questions where they can kind of just in their mind, having just seen a play, red cell that or feed forward that and think about how they might adjust that just a little bit differently. So that's how I would use feed forward on the field in an informal way. Another example would be on offense. Hey, if you throw the ball there, what do you expect a man-to-man defense that's sliding from the crease to do? And I know a lot of listeners don't know what a defense sliding from the crease means. It doesn't matter. The point is, the player just threw the ball there. The play's now ended. We're doing a little bit of coaching, and I'm using feed forward in the form of questions to say, talk me through the pluses and minuses of what you just did with the perspective of what the defense is going to do in reaction to it. And then the two other areas, Ian, I would point to that I'm focusing on in the future is my homestead. We, about 3 years ago, moved on to some land in the woods in the Pacific Northwest, out 15 minutes outside of town, and it's a perfect spot. We love it, but it definitely needs some work. And it's 5 acres, which isn't a ton of land. It's certainly enough to keep me busy, and the house itself needs some work. So turning this into our home the way we want it to be, and really customizing it to our desires and our needs, it is a big project that my wife Melissa and I are working on. And then the last one is being a parent. I have 2 boys, 2 girls, ages 17, 16, 12, and 7. And the most rewarding, the most challenging, the most tiring, the most invigorating job on earth, in my opinion, is being a parent. And when I put these techniques to use of trust and open communication and feed forward and feedback, if I can do them with my kids, I know I'm on the right track, because my kids poke holes in them. Like, they're masters at poking holes in them. And I'm emotionally attached to them, right? So it's where I'm at my weakest. So if I can do this stuff successfully with my kids, I'm on the right track. And I fail at it often with my children. And it just gives me opportunities to work harder on it.
It resonates for me. I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old at the moment, and I'm teaching them both to ski, or we're up here, learning that. And as you say, there are so many learning opportunities from children that you go, I wonder if I can do this with this in this context. I can do that in business. I can do that in a professional sporting team. I love some of your future aspirations and the way that you're orienting there, the Masters in Psychology. The asking questions in lacrosse, and I think there's probably a connection there with, at the fundamentals of psychology. It's about asking questions, and as a psychologist, and I'm going to leave you with something to ponder, and it's this: in psychology, there's an enormous question, which is how prevalent is the therapist effect. And the therapist effect is really about the ability to just get rapport and build a relationship with somebody in trust, which you natively do. So my question for you, if you go into a master's in psych, is how do you test between what you've learned from as a psych and what do you naturally bring to the table, which is a lot. And for you, the confounding feature for you will be that you natively know how to build trust and get rapport, and the therapist effect for you would be very strong. So I'm going to leave you with that as a challenge and something to ponder. And I really appreciate today's conversation. It's been awesome. I've learned a lot.
Ian, thank you. I wrote notes down on that question to ponder. Thank you for having me. I've loved this. I've learned far more than I've given. So thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Salience podcast. Please leave us a review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to the Frontline Mind newsletter by visiting our website at frontlinemind.com. Have you got a topic you would like some more salience on? Send us a message on LinkedIn or email team@frontlinemind.com.